John Cott is the president of the Cott Auto Group, based here in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. Alongside of his family and team, they grew to 11 rooftops in Western Canada and are continuing their growth of their group. John actually grew up in a very small farming community in Saskatchewan and began working at dealers when he was 15. When opportunity knocked to eventually buy his first location in Kelowna, he and his family moved west and bought their first store. This was a very awesome conversation for me. When I moved to the city, I seen John's stores, and finally to connect with him and hear his story and his passion about the automotive space, it was a highlight for me. Thank you everybody for listening in. Enjoy the episode. John, congratulations on Okanagan Dodge acquisition. That's exciting.
Thank you.
Number 11, I believe.
Yeah, correct? We're pretty excited about it. So it being in Kelowna and the Okanagan here, so it kind of falls into our, our synergies and our platform and whatnot. So we're pretty excited about having that store.
Absolutely. What this is your second Dodge store, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. What makes you jump into Stellantis at this time with the uncertainty?
You know what? They've been a challenge for sure as far as leadership and whatnot. But I have seen some positive things in the last 3 to 4 months, and I'm hoping to see more. So it sounds like they have a better vision for even EVs and hybrids and. So, as long as they keep putting on some incentives on the new vehicles to make them competitive, which they've been starting to do over the last 2-3 months, I feel that, the brand's going to be on the uptick, right? Because, it has been one of the most challenging brands that we have for sure. So, we're optimistic about next year. The big thing with this one was, having 5 other dealerships in Kelowna, it just made sense, right? So to have another opportunity, and especially when you tie in the used cars, right? So, that gives us roughly around 600 used cars in Kelowna, right? So it allows us to do that, right? So
absolutely. Well, with Tim back in the Ram seat as CEO now, that should hopefully bring back the Hemi. I know there's some talk about that, some rumors, so we'll see where that goes.
No, they've got some pretty cool vehicles, muscle cars. I've got a Demon myself that I got this year, and it's a big, powerful beast, right? When you take it out and whatnot. So there's still a lot of love for that type of stuff, and there's still a lot of loyalists with Dodge and Jeep. Jeep's a great brand, so they have a ton of loyalty with the Jeep brand. So those are going to be some of the assets and some of the vehicles that we focus more on, right? So
definitely. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll circle around back to talk about the markets and Stellantis and the brands. Yesterday, you guys released your very first episode of Get Local with Genesis, and I watched it. Fantastic concept.
Thank you.
And I'm not just saying that because you have the perfect blend of community people, but also Genesis in the eyes of the right individuals.
Right. I guess the idea behind it was, it's a little bit of a steal from Seinfeld, Coffee with Cars with Comedians or whatever. But I wanted to do, obviously having Genesis as the backdrop. It's a newer luxury brand, and we really want to get that name out into the Okanagan and Kelowna and even Canada wide. It's a beautiful product, and it has everything that all the major luxuries have. So. And this was just an idea where I could kind of tie, 3 in 1 sort of, get some awareness to luxury with Genesis, and then also just bring some local people together, which is, local business people, and then, tie it into a restaurant, more local restaurants than the name brands and the big box brands. So that's going to be the thing. We'll probably try and do some other type of people, maybe the mayor of Kelowna and some other things. But Kelowna now is going to push it on their platform for us.
Oh, awesome!
So it'll hit their website and all their platforms as well. So I'm hoping that it takes. I was pretty happy with the first one, so I think Dale did a pretty good job on it as well. And the young guys from the restaurant there, it's a good story, right? The restaurant business is pretty tough nowadays. So to have 2 young guys, kind of put it all on the line and be 10 years in, that's kind of why I chose them as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to more episodes.
Yeah, right on.
Let's dive into Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into who JK is. I know you go by JK. I see that
Yeah, I do.
all
Yeah,
over the internet. So, um, grew up in a very small town in Saskatchewan,
correct. Yeah.
farming family.
Yeah, you know what? I just got in the car business. My family were farmers, right? So my dad and grandpa had the local farms. So in the off season, because you're either seeding in, just you're either seeding in that May, that that April, May, and then harvest is end of August. So on the off seasons, when I wasn't, out on the farm, I was always working at the dealership, so I started in detail and doing the lubes when I was a teenager, 13, 14, and 15, and then when I turned to 18, I wanted to try selling cars and watching those salesmen and everything from when I was younger. And then my dad was a salesperson at Eaton, so I kind of had a little bit of inherited natural salesmanship, and I just wanted to. So I it's a funny story, but I was pretty persistent in the local dealership, Barber Motors, Mel Barber, and giving me an opportunity as an 18-year-old, which he did, and kind of never looked back. So, learned a lot of things from him when I first started, and kind of carried him through now. But that's just was always pretty good at it, and I ended up being a way better, car salesman slash car guy than I was a farmer. So, yeah.
What lessons did you take from your childhood growing up on the farm and bring to automotive? Like I know hard work is probably a
Yeah,
common theme across the
I
board.
mean, it's a different generation, obviously. I look at my sons, and even I have a 15-year-old too, and I look at what my dad and then even my grandpa, like, you just, obviously, each generation has a different way of doing things, and I think I learned a lot from both my dad and my grandpa about work ethic and, having drive and whatnot. And then just how to treat people and whatnot too. From being a small town, I think I try and bring that approach to it as well as much as I can. So I think the combination of all those type of things. So I still kind of make small town decisions that you would make in a small town, whether it's how we how giving out the turkeys and doing stuff like that are traditions that I learned from growing up there and being a bit of a small town guy. You never kind of forget where you come from, right?
I think Kelowna is such a fascinating city because I mean, where I'm from, there's 10,000 people, and in Kelowna,
Right.
it almost feels the same as my hometown. Like everybody's so connected, and people treat each other with respect. It's very small town feel, so that's very interesting
But
that you carry.
yeah, I mean, I think Kelowna's growing. I mean, it's when I first got here in 2011, the population was like a little over 100,000. I think it was 110. I mean, I looked recently, and it's just under 150,000 now. So and growing. So lots of big buildings going up and whatnot downtown. So it's losing a little bit of that small town feel. I mean, the economy is growing. So I feel pretty good being in Kelowna, right? If you had to pick a spot to live in Canada, Kelowna's got to be in the top list, right? So.
Definitely. So you were in senior management at a store in Edmonton, and then you decide to purchase your first store, Kelowna Hyundai.
Yeah, not quite how it went down. I mean, I worked my way up in Edmonton, so I started out as sort of lease renewal person at a Ford dealership, Waterloo Ford, working for Al and Randall Purvis. Worked my way up to general managers there. Then I became a partner with Go Auto now. They were a different name back then for a dealership. And then eventually I moved to Auto Canada. I was vice president of sales for Auto Canada at one time. And then, got terminated, got a package, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I ended up coming to the Okanagan here and ran a small dealer group here. And then within the first year, I noticed Kelowna Hyundai wasn't as doing as good as I thought, and was able to purchase a deal, my first deal off the owner, and he kind of financed me and put it all on the line, and the rest is history, right? So that was in 2012. So that was just under 13 years ago, right? It was November of 2011. So first full year was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think in your Get Local with Genesis video, you spoke about your two sons taking over some acquisitions, the two latest ones. Going
Yeah.
back to your acquisition from Hyundai, what surprises came about? What learning lessons did you take away from that? Because I'm sure there's
On the
several.
first one, you mean? On the first one?
Correct. Correct.
The
Yeah.
first one, oh, I was so green, right? I mean, I had been involved in acquisitions for the companies I had worked for before, but when it's your own money and you don't have a CFO and you don't have, all these advisors and different managers, and obviously both AutoCan and Go Auto were seasoned at doing acquisitions, so I had observed and learned. But your first one, you get educated pretty quick when it's your own money and whatnot. So, but the person I bought it off of was pretty good to me. I thought he was pretty fair in everything he did. So looking back, I don't have any regrets on that one. And like I said, he did do a vendor take back, which nowadays is a little bit harder to do. So I mean, my first one, the seller, kind of financed me over 3 years, and I was able to pay it off in 3 years. And I mean that was the key on the first one, right?
Awesome. How did that feel for you? I mean, you're working in these big dealer groups and you finally have, your own name on one. What was the initial vision
Yeah, I
for
mean
the
it was pretty
store?
exciting. It was risky. It was exciting. It was nerve wracking. It was, the bank was saying, why is a guy with this big a net worth selling to a guy with this low net worth on this dealership, and they limited me on my income the first couple of years, so I had to take sort of the finance bank told me I couldn't take more, a certain salary, which I was used to making a lot more. So that part was good. I mean, my wife and family were pretty supportive because it was kind of a dream and something I always wanted to do. And have your own name and start your own company. And it was always supposed to be just the one store. I told Trina, we'll just do this one, and just let me do this one. So without having, we didn't have a mortgage. We had some money in the savings. We were pretty set for the rest of our lives, because you got to remember I'm 55 now, and that was, you know, roughly around, 13 years ago. So I was 42 and pretty financially stable, not to have to. And then kind of went all into it with the debt, right? So it was. I guess that would have been the biggest thing, is, but I was pretty driven. So I mean, when I first started, I was the sales manager. I desked every deal. I touched every customer. I did everything the first 2 or 3 years, before we really started to grow and do everything. So I would say that I was, ultra hands-on my
Yeah.
first store.
No kidding. It sounds like it. So you said you only wanted to have the one store. What point did it change for you? Because I mean, 1 to 11 must
I
have
don't know.
quite
I
the
guess I
difference.
got bored a little bit with the one store, and like I said, with my previous jobs, I was used to running several stores. So then I was just like, okay, well, and the same owner I bought Kelowna Hyundai had other stores, so the second store was actually from him as well. So it just was a standard, just kind of graduated into that, right? So the second store was Maple Ridge, and then we added the used car lot by direct. Which I kind of had the foresight to see that, where Buy Direct was, that's where I wanted to build Kelowna Hyundai someday. So I did a lease on the used car lot with the option to buy the property at the end and have first right of refusal. And that worked out really well for me, right? So, being able to, tie up that lease and that property in 214, to where my home now is at Kelowna Hyundai, Kelowna Genesis, and Buy Direct, was, I think, was pretty smart at the time in 214 to look that far ahead. But that ended up being really good for us. So
Absolutely. And you mentioned your family as well. To see family run stores is becoming less and less prominent, but then to see family run groups like yourselves with 11 under the belt, how have you kept this thing together? What has been the glue?
uh, I mean, family is always, there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be emotions and personalities. I mean, my kids grew up in the car business, so they knew the demands. They knew what was expected. They had heard me. They both played. Wouldn't say professional sports, but they both played hockey at a high level. So I think they had some of that with it. And then, they weren't really, they weren't just given a management job. They started on the sales floor. Brandon started on the sales floor, worked his way up. We agreed that he should go to another dealer group for a while. When he was in that 23, 24-year-old range, and went and got some experience and kind of grew up a bit and matured a little bit. And then Jordan went to university and got a business degree and learned the I's and T's of some of that stuff that you learn in college. And and then I guess the biggest success for us is as working together is we all agree that we're still a family no matter what. So sometimes we can get irritated or get annoyed, but I can't remember the last time where one of us was upset and didn't talk to the other person for a day. That maybe happened a couple of years ago or something, but we always seem to talk it out, and we just always agree that family's first. So we're a family first, and then we're partners in the company second, right? So and that has kind of kept us focused on the right things.
That's powerful. And I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine your team members seeing that they have a stronger trust in you to have like deeper conversations and the difficult
Yeah, I
ones.
mean, we've built some really good relationships, right? So some of the senior managers have personally worked with me for almost 20 years, and then they've seen my boys when they were young, and even came to the hockey games when they were young, and whatnot. And then so now they've seen them grow into to 30-year-old men, and are really good at their positions, and now have become their bosses. So it it works out well. And then they both of my sons and even my son-in-law, everyone has and my daughter was involved in the business, but now she's taking care of babies. But I think everyone has sort of a different some type of mindset and different outlook on things. So when we do make decisions, we can see everyone's point of view a little differently. And Jordan is very expense minded, and very cautious in how he approaches things, where Brandon is a risk taker and a bit more about putting up the dollars, and maybe more of a natural salesperson. And so that brings a really good mix when you kind of put them together. You know what I mean? So one wants to really save money and the other one wants to spend it. So somewhere in the middle sometimes is usually what happens.
Yeah, it's good to have that contrast.
Yeah. And sometimes, like I said, in this acquisition, now I'm kind of, rather than just telling them how to do things, and, sometimes what I've learned is sometimes they'll say, hey, I want to do this, or I want to hire this person, or I want to give this person a different type of pay plan, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And I'll be like, I've already tried that. It doesn't work. And then I finally realized I gotta let them make those mistakes on their own now. So sometimes they'll just be like, okay, I don't agree with it, but if you want to try it, let's do it. And then they'll come back and say, yeah, you were right. So I think that's been important for me to realize that I don't have to hold their hand on every decision. Sometimes I gotta let them make mistakes and fail. And that's where these acquisitions came in, where I mentioned that I wanted them to kind of do everything. I was there. So, when we did the acquisition with Auto Canada, this last one, they handled all the negotiations. And then, if there was a problem, I would come in at the end. I kind of gave them the template and the guidelines that I wanted, but I needed them to experience it and learn everything. And it went over really well. So
Awesome. Great to hear. How has that been for you, learning to let go? Has that been very difficult in your
tough,
career?
yeah. I mean, it's when it's your baby, right? And it's, I mean, second generation coming in and having a dealer group is a little different when you're first generation starting it. So I've had to kind of, I guess, respect that a little bit with them, and vice versa. I think they've learned to respect where I'm coming from based on, being the first generation and making it all happen, and then, you know, transitioning that way. So I think we have a mutual understanding and agreement on how things should work. So I think even for my wife Trina and myself, that would be our biggest adjustment, is that, we had to go through lots of hardship, to get where we are. And sometimes we don't always think that they've, I guess, had enough hardship. Not that we want them to have hardship, but it's maybe sometimes been a little easier on where we've come and how fast we've come and stuff like that. Where they, I don't know if they truly understand how tough it was at the start, right? So
I seen a poll on LinkedIn the other day talking about um, it was a poll for GMs and dealer groups, the three biggest things that need to be improved in 2025. And the top of the list was the customer experience. What sets Cott Auto Group apart when you talk about customer and employee experience?
I mean, I was just talking about this and writing about it on an email today. I mean, the biggest thing when you're dealing with employees or customers is just always remember to be fair and just, and we try and have that culture. So even though there's policies, procedures, and things that, you know, you want to have followed and stuff like that, sometimes you just have to take a step back and look and say, well, what's fair? What's fair in the customer's mind? What's fair? Did we treat this properly, whether it's an employee or a customer? And make sure that we do the right thing, right? So that's the biggest one, is just trying to stay on that path, because sometimes you can focus on on profits, and sometimes you can focus on expenses, and at the end of the day, we want to be a company that's really fair, right? And all our decision making and everything we do. So we try and stay to that as much as we can.
I think that's a huge, really important point because the black eye on the industry, people coming in and not trusting dealerships. And if all dealerships are on that blueprint of adding fairness to their sales process and their culture.
Yeah, that would be the biggest challenge, is that, that all my senior managers become aligned and then trickle down, right? So it starts with myself, and then it goes to my sons, and then it goes to the GMs, and then it goes down. So if some cog in the wheel is more about profits and, taking shortcuts and saving money, sometimes at the expense of either the customer or the employee, it, that's where the issues happen, and that's where I kind of try and reflect back, and we're having all the GMs in tomorrow. But that's going to be something that we reemphasize every year, is like, hey, what's fair? Do you have the right mindset when you're looking at things, and putting yourself into either the employee's point of view or the customer's point of view, when you're making decisions? And sometimes it's at the expense of our company. It's at the expense. Hey, sometimes we got to spend a little bit more money just to do what's right, right?
Yeah, you mentioned your
My
leadership.
biggest challenge would be to make sure that, now you got 300 employees, and it's easy for, myself and 10 guys to think that way, but the hardest part is getting everyone to think that way.
You mentioned your leadership team and managers and GMs. How do you find great talent and build that team and then make sure they align with your culture?
You know what? I've been fortunate that it hasn't been as hard as some may say. We have lots of people that now are reaching out to us because, I think they like, we have a good reputation. They see that we've had lots of people that have worked for us for, 10, 12, 15 years, and in that, none of the GMs have left. General sales managers, a lot of those guys have been with us a long time, and then we try and promote within, and we have a great training program. So the training and development of staff has always been, I think, really important to us, and I think because of that, we've been able to, get more people that, maybe aren't getting developed as much at where they're working, and they see, they know they're going to get pushed, because I mean that's also my reputation, and or our company reputation. But they want to be developed, they want to keep growing, and they want, more opportunities, and they think they can get it, right? So with our company, so we always seem to be able to fill a position pretty quick when it comes to management. Sometimes the support positions are a little bit trickier, but the management, the senior level managers, have not been an issue for us at all.
That's incredible to hear. That's usually a
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah.
You mentioned sales training videos. 6 months ago, roughly, I was watching one of your videos on YouTube. I think you were at one of your Chrysler store, and you were talking about when you started in sales, you bought somebody coffee like I'm paraphrasing it, at maybe a Tim Hortons or something, and then that person came in and asked for John. Can you share that story?
Yeah, I wasn't Tim Hortons back in those days. I'm dating myself a little bit. You got to remember that was when I was, 19 or 20 in Weyburn. But the story goes like this. Mel Barber at the time um, said you have a day on the road. So your day on the road meant go prospecting. And nowadays it's called a day off, right? But back then I took it literal. Like the boss says, "Hey, a day on the road," I jumped in my car and started knocking on doors and whatnot. But and he also taught us, when you're out for coffee or prospecting or do whatever, try and promote yourself. So, like I said, I was very young and schoolish at the time on wanting to be the best I could be. So, I noticed a lot that everyone was going for coffee in a small town at the same time. So, I asked Mel at the time if he would fund, a small amount of me every day. So what I did is, at the time, coffee was only 25 cents. So I would go to a coffee shop with, another colleague of some sort, and I would give the server, $10 or whatever it was at the time, and ask if she could pay for everyone's, with the 10 or 15 business cards. And she would go around because there were, in a small town, there was a lot of older senior people and whatnot, that was their standard, that was their thing to do. They would go for coffee. So I'd pick a different place once or twice a week, and I'd buy the coffee for the whole coffee shop, and it wasn't that much money. And Mel paid for half. He co-opted me on it, and sure enough, yeah, people started saying, "Hey." This older guy that was 79 years old walked in and said, "Hey, is John Codd here?" And then the other salesman ran over and said, "That's my customer. I sold him his last 3 cars." And I said, "Hey, I don't know. He's asking for me." And the old guy said, "I want to buy off John. You haven't bought me a coffee in 3 years. He bought me one, and I don't even know him." So it was just self promotion, self marketing, that I started at a young age, and it's always kind of done me well, right? So thinking of those things, right? So
It's really interesting. I'm assuming that you agree with this. Times have changed. A lot of sales guys will wait for leads to come in from third parties or
yeah,
whatnot.
I mean, I try and tell that story about days on the road because everyone has their days off, and days off are more important now to the younger generation for sure. Than my generation or even my dad's and grandpa's generation. You worked on your days off a lot, right? So now those days are important to people and important to families, and that's been an adjustment, probably for a lot of owners that are my age. So, but the day on the road is, if you're going to be off and do errands, why not teach the guys on how to promote themselves and whatnot? So I try and use that day on the road thing, a little bit, and some guys work it, and they'll get referrals or whatnot, but it's still, I think, an important part of being a salesperson is promoting yourself, in wherever you're buying things or whatever you're doing, and I think a lot of people forget that, right? So there's people always need a car, right? So you never know when they're going to need one, so why not promote one with everything you do, right? Promote who you are and what you do in your business, right? So.
It makes sense. With 11 dealerships, where does the vision carry from here? Do you and your boys
We're going
want
to
to
have
grow this?
small organic growth. We paid off a lot of debt last year. We're hoping to pay off lots this year. It's been a good year. Not as much, not as good as last year. Both Stellantis and Nissan were down a little bit. The Hyundai brand is awesome. Kia brand is awesome. I think, every Kia and Hyundai dealer has good years. Nissan's on the uptick. Stellantis is on the upkick. Genesis is growing. So we think 25 is going to be a big year. We've got the Ford dealership. It's had a great 3 or 4 month start, so I'm really happy with that. So yeah, I guess I would say that, small organic growth. I think I put in our 5-year plan with the bank that we wanted to get to 15 by 2029. So that comes quick. 4 years comes quick, right? So we're at 11 now. So
Yeah, that's exciting. Are there any other franchises that you're looking at, or you would consider over others?
um, I'm not partial to actually chasing a. It just depends. If there's synergies that I can use with the company and the area. You know, a lot of the brands have their own strengths, so I'm not afraid of any brands. And it would be nice to get a couple more brands for sure. But it just depends on the opportunity that presents itself, right?
When you say you're not scared of any brands, does that mean Jaguar's on the table?
Probably not Jaguar, but that's just not, that goes way off our sort of approach on the business. But never say never, right? So, but
What trends do you see shaping the automotive industry in the next few years?
well, I mean, we got to be conscious of the EVs and what's happening with China and whatnot, and how dominant they are in other markets and stuff. So, I could see them coming into Canada, and obviously, with the election and the new leadership in the U.S. I have a feeling with the tariffs and everything that could affect the auto industry next year. So I'm anxious to see how that's going to level itself out. But most of my brands are going to be pretty good regardless. So it might not affect myself as some of the Japanese brands. Wait and see. I think the economy is going to be good. I think the supply and demand has really opened up. I think a lot of the brands have got more efficient on their vehicles as far as supply, vehicle supply and what's going to happen and the way they're forecasting and whatnot. So I'm feeling pretty good about things. So I'm feeling good. I think the used car market is going to be really good next year. And then our service and parts operations had a record year, so I think that's going to trickle into next year. So, those are the pillars we're going to focus. We want to, everyone comes to the brand to buy a new car, but it's the other, it's used parts and service that sometimes can make or break your success in a dealership. So we're going to be pretty focused on those as well, right? So.
Yeah, and I imagine a Canadian 2025 election will be beneficial as well.
Oh yeah, no, that's we're hoping for good things there. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Where do you see AI coming into the dealership space? How are you guys adapting it right now?
We're at the infant stage because I mean, there's different levels of AI and there's different companies that say AI, but they're not really AI. But I think obviously, with internet and how you communicate and everything like that is the future. So, with technology and whatnot, I think it's going to keep improving. And I think there's some advancement that even in our company that we can use to give better customer experience and whatnot. So we're you know we're growing. We have a technology manager that heads that up, and he's brought some new things to the table as far as how we do our descriptions on used cars and how to make us more efficient on internet leads and whatnot. So those are things that I think are gonna keep helping us get more efficient. Um, I think we're probably a 6 out of 10 on that right now, and I would like us to get to a solid 8 or 9 on that by the end of the year. So there's definitely some opportunities for growth in our company on that. So
Amazing. It's been really cool seeing all this new technology coming out and seeing how
yeah, we're
dealers are
gonna go to
really.
NADA and really explore a lot of some new software and some new companies. So we're heading up there, and usually you can really get educated at those conferences, right? So
That's coming up. I've never been, but I've been told to go, so I would love to make it out sometime. With Stellantis, how do you feel about these price cuts that they've been talking about? How do you think it's going to impact you guys? Yeah, I've heard rumors of that, but I'm sure you have some more intel on that. Yeah, I have a feeling you're right. I grew up in a Mopar family. If it wasn't Mopar, it wasn't in the driveway. It's kind of unfortunate that the Grand Wagoneer didn't take off more than it did. It was a great platform, just very expensive. So it'll be interesting to see what
Yeah, I
happens
drove
to
one for a
those.
while. It's an unbelievable vehicle. So um, it's got a lot of technology there and whatnot, right? So
Yes. Awesome, John. Well, I guess last question that I always ask the dealers who come on is if you had one piece of advice to people getting into the automotive space, what would that be?
one piece of advice, you know what? It's a great business. It's a great business. I mean, if you work hard, you can. The sky's the limit. For myself, like I have a grade 12 education. I'm doing pretty good. So, I was pretty driven. I worked my butt off, and the business can be very rewarding if you have that mindset, right? So, you know, there's so many different fields that you can go into in the auto industry, right? Whether it's technology, whether it's sales, whether it's service, whether it's parts. So it's like five different businesses in one, right? So there's something for everyone, right?
I think that's something that people overlook often is the how much dynamic there is in auto space. Awesome, John. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
so
I know
much.
you're
I
a busy man.
appreciate you taking some time, and we'll look forward to seeing each other again.
I hope you found some value in this conversation, just like I did, and we're excited to continue to bring interviews and conversations with dealership legends, maybe just like yourself. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. I'm your host, Brayden Gingrich from Dealer Surge.